Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, LeBron James is listed as doubtful for Wednesday night's game, but I don't think he's going to play in this one and may not play in a few to follow. That's not good. Plus, if you're waiting around for the relationship between the Lakers and Jerry West to improve, keep waiting. We'll talk about that and much more on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to thank everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. We get this thing up for you bright and early. And Andy, how much does it cost to listen to Locked On Lakers every single day of the week if you want?
Zero, nothing, nada.
So yeah, we appreciate all the support and want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Don't hesitate. Check out PrizePicks.com and use the promo code NBA or go to your app store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy.
Also, make sure after you make us your free first listen that you make another Locked On podcast your second free listen. Whole damn network is free to you. Mm-hmm. We recommend Locked On Rams, but you can go all over the place. There's, I guarantee, something for you, all of them free of charge.
So we'll get to this Jerry West story that Sam Amick wrote at The Athletic today. That is fascinating on a few levels, to say the least. He and the Lakers are not seeing eye to eye these days. Also, we'll try to get to a couple of responses to our show for Tuesday about Frank Vogel and how much blame he gets in the blame pie. A few people had some responses to our show for that. We'll try to get to. But Andy, let's start with LeBron James. Doubtful for tonight's game. I don't think he's going to play in this one, and it's not looking good for the games that follow either.
Frank Vogel during Tuesday's practice talked about this more in preventative terms, with regards to LeBron not playing in these games, as opposed to something specific that they are worrying about or that they are concerned about making worse. I think it's more just the idea of this is going to be something that will be difficult for him to play through if it's continually aggravating him. So we have to make sure that we can make the rest of the season, however many games LeBron can play pain-free, relatively pain-free, as productive as possible and as many as possible. And if that means sacrificing a few off the top, so be it. They're looking at this bigger picture for the play-in / playoffs.
And that, I mean, it's obviously the smart way to do it. But, you noted it on Monday's show and Tuesday's show, really. This next stretch of games for the Lakers is important on a lot of levels, in part because they're playing teams that are relatively in one way or another vulnerable, but also because, when you look at Wednesday and Thursday, they're playing the team that's directly behind them in the standings in Portland and the team that's directly in front of them in the standings in the Clippers, and Wednesday and Thursday respectively. And, you got to win those games if you want to have a chance to keep the Blazers safely behind you, so you don't have to worry about falling to the 10 spot. And then, suddenly, you're a little more worried about disaster striking and the unthinkable happening, and you don't even finish in the top 10. And if you want to be able to climb up to 7 or 8 and have at least a more advantageous spot in the play-in, well, you need to beat the Clippers. And so, it's not a great time for LeBron to be missing games. But I'll say this: if there's a silver lining to how bad the Lakers have been and how poorly this season has gone, being 5 games behind Dallas and Denver right now means that the Lakers don't really have any incentive to push in terms of, making a big run to try to, because the 6 is way better than 7, 8, 9, 10, but they're not going to get there. Even if LeBron came back, the idea that they could make up 5 games on those teams with 30 to play, it feels unrealistic. So at least they don't have to weigh that or, pretend that it's a thing or feel pressure to try to push their way up the standings. They can play this thing out as best they can and just try to get the best play-in seed they can with as healthy a team as possible. None of this is to say this. Like, I realize, if it's one game, you have a couple cracks at whatever it might be. Like you feel confident that a healthy LeBron and AD and Westbrook will push their way through a game against Portland or a game against Minnesota to get into the big boy playoffs or something like that. But you could also end up in a situation where, Kawhi and Paul George have come back and you've got to play like a one-game playoff with the Clippers.
By the way, after so many different years of talking about the hallway series in 2006, we were supposed to have it, but the Lakers ended up blowing that 3-1 lead to the Suns in the first round. There was the times where we were hoping that Kobe and Powell would face off against the Lob City Clippers. There's the most recent incarnations of the Lakers versus Kawhi and Paul George. We've been promised this so many times and it's never happened. We will know that the basketball gods are a bunch of sick mother bleepers if the first time we ever get anything Lakers Clippers playoff adjacent is a play-in game.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is basically the basketball gods going double middle fingers and laughing their asses off at the entire city of LA and basketball. And I don't even know what we did to deserve this, because this is an awesome basketball city.
It's really, I think, the best basketball city in the country. Like,
yes, I don't know what we did to deserve this, but we
people talk
pissed
about
off
New York.
Somebody upstairs.
LA is the epicenter. I really genuinely believe that.
I do too.
We'll move on here in a second though, but I do think it's worth noting that my concern with LeBron isn't just based on this season. And no, I am concerned about this season and whether or not he can be healthy, because he has to be the guy that he was for that stretch when AD was out and 30 points a night and playing like an MVP. He's got to be that guy. AD's got to be that guy. And we'll see that's the only chance they have to advance in the playoffs. And it's possible, but but with LeBron hurt, you're worried about it. This is also a bad sign for next year. And the Lakers are in a position where putting themselves out of trying again to make it so LeBron doesn't have to do as much heavy lifting, trying again to fix that problem, is going to be even harder this offseason than it was last offseason. It didn't work coming into this year. It hasn't worked since he got here. And LeBron is going to be less equipped next year to carry a massive burden again. Like, it's not going to get better. I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff. He's like a normal basketball player now, but it's not going to get better. And the Lakers are going to it's going to be harder for them to get help.
Well, I mean, this really becomes doubly an issue because Anthony Davis is no given to stay on the court. If AD was a rock and you could really rely on that guy to be there for, say, 70 to 82 games a year, obviously missing LeBron is something that you're going to have to contend with. The entire offense is still, at the end of the day, built around LeBron running it. Mm-hmm. But if you have AD there as a mainstay, game in, game out, and say what you will about Russell Westbrook, but he has been reliable this season. He has been, in terms of availability, he is.
Yeah, it's almost like a troll. He's almost trolling Lakers fans with his hyper availability.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, remember, he was in COVID protocols for like 15 minutes.
Yep.
And again, that was kind of double middle fingers as the theme of this segment goes. But like it would be something the Lakers would have to contend with regardless, this season, next season,
mm-hmm.
In terms of figuring that out. I know we're going to talk about that more at length in terms of the implications next segment, but it's really as much an issue about Anthony Davis as it is LeBron himself.
Yeah. A couple other things we're going to get into, like a very interesting nugget from Russell Westbrook today about advice he got from Shaquille O'Neal. And Andy, I have a question for you as it relates to advice from Shaq, and then we'll dive into this Jerry West stuff, because it says stuff about West. It says stuff about the Lakers. We'll do all that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by PrizePicks. Laker fans, you've been hearing me tell you about PrizePicks for months. Have you signed up yet? If not, what the hell is the matter with you? PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. You're going to love this app for NBA and mixed sports pick'em for a limited time. There's a no-brainer offer for all of you, for our listeners. Users get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entries scores a single point. Like, just pick anybody that you know scores points at all, you're going to win this thing. But you got to use the code NBA. That's right. It's an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans only who use the code NBA. PrizePicks has the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. PrizePicks offers more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players, only recording a handful of minutes each game. And this is really fun. PrizePicks offers mixed sport entries. You could take like the over on Anthony Davis points combined with the over on Matthew Stafford completions in the Super Bowl. Again, Locked On Rams, recommend it. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. PrizePicks safe. They offer fast withdrawals. So go to prizepicks.com today. Use the promo code NBA or go to the App Store and download the app. If you're not playing PrizePicks, you don't know what you're missing.
Hey, Andy, people think that unusual circumstances mean complicated taxes, but for TurboTax Live experts, that just means it's interesting. That's what these guys live for. We all have unique lives, whether you've invested in crypto for the first time this year, or whether you own an up-and-coming small business, or you're just raising rambunctious little children. They got them all over your house. TurboTax Live has experts who can answer your tax questions, walk you through the whole process, or really even just do your taxes, help you do that from start to finish. They get you every deduction you deserve, no matter what your unique situation is. And you can talk to a TurboTax Live expert through your phone or your computer without ever leaving your house. TurboTax Live experts are here to help you however you need it. And if you need an extra hand off your taxes to them, and they'll just do it all for you. To TurboTax Live experts, an interesting life can mean an even greater refund. Visit turbotax.com to learn more. People, you do your thing. They've got your taxes. Intuit TurboTax Live. This was I thought very interesting from Russell Westbrook. He received some advice, Andy, from Shaquille O'Neal, of all people, Lakers legend, and insurance salesman, that he needed to change some speeds. Kind of an outsider's view of watching Russ wasn't doing some of the things that made him so successful. He was asked, Westbrook today was asked, what have you changed? And got back a little bit of my game. Changing my speeds, getting aggressive, doing little stuff, and he attributes some of that to Shaq. He said, when somebody like Shaq talks to you, you listen. You remember a few years ago, Andy, when Dwight Howard and Steve Nash were on the team, and the idea was Shaq, the Dwight Howard and Steve Nash would be like the greatest pick and roll combo ever.
Yeah,
because that's what they were really good at.
Statistically, at the time, Steve Nash was the best pick and roll orchestrator in the game, and Dwight Howard was the best roll man in the game. And for both of them, it was by a pretty wide, indisputable margin.
So that was all scuttled when Shaq went on TNT and basically mocked Dwight for not being a real center. Like, a pick and roll guy is not a real center. And Dwight took all of that to heart and refused to run pick and rolls basically with Steve Nash. And that was the end of it, even before the injury.
I have never seen, because, Steve Nash is one of the renowned great teammates, not just in NBA history, but like in sports history. I remember being at a practice where Nash, as frustrated as I've ever seen him, just was like, yeah, Dwight won't do this. I don't know why, but he won't do it.
Won't do it.
Yeah.
So Shaq broke Dwight in the "it's going to be fun" year.
Yeah, it was leading up to that before. It wasn't just that year. There had been all the stuff about tugging on Superman's cape, and there had been a lot of beef leading up to it. But the final stake was really put into Dwight's heart during that season.
And right when he happened to get where the Lakers needed him, Shaq essentially ruined him.
Yes.
Does fixing Russ make up for destroying Dwight that many years ago? Did Shaq finally make up for that act?
No. Russell Westbrook was supposed to be this team's third superstar. Dwight Howard was supposed to be the dude that took the torch from Kobe Bryant in his prime, the next franchise face. So no, this does not make up for it, because the who was broken versus who was fixed, there's a huge gap in importance to this franchise. So no.
That was my
Not
answer
even
too.
close.
I was just wondering if maybe you had a better spin on it. No, Shaq really is one of the worst things he ever did in the Lakers was
No, I
breaking
mean,
play.
I like if somehow Shaq fixed AD, like was able to keep him on the court like 24, like maybe it would require like being his physical therapist or something like that. Then
That might
yeah,
work, right.
that would make up for it. But this doesn't. No.
All right, so let's start on the West thing. And then we'll take a break and then we'll come back to it. But if you missed it, Sam Amick, great writer at The Athletic, great NBA writer, has, as part of their series on the 75 greatest players of all time, he wrote the West piece. I think it's coming in at like 14 or something like that. So kudos to Jerry for that. But really what this story is about both West's sort of legendary dissatisfaction with everything. I mean, just sort of legendarily hard on himself.
Yes, he is. It is both fascinating and very depressing.
I find it incredibly depressing. It's like he seems unable to find any joy in his career. We've had an opportunity to interview him a couple times each, and it's like it is not shtick. I mean, this is who the guy is. And I find it very sad. But the thrust of this story really becomes it's about the total non-relationship and the bitterness that exists between West and the Lakers. That really becomes the focus of this story, mostly because as Sam kind of relays it, this is where Jerry West went with the interview. I know things have been bad between West and the Lakers for a long time, but it's still jarring to see it kind of written out as starkly and to see it on a page as starkly for an organization, Andy, that celebrates history so much that makes its own history so much part of the experience of going to and being at a Laker game and being a Laker and all of this stuff. To see this gigantic rift between arguably the most consequential Laker of all time, and the organization is it's got to be very upsetting for Lakers fans and certainly jarring for people who read about and talk about and cover the team.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said for a long time, I think there are three choices for greatest Laker of all time. It's either Magic, it's Kobe, or it's Jerry West. Those are your three. Even somebody like Kareem, I don't think ends up in that conversation because he's not a lifer. And if you're looking to break ties over a lot of either trivial things, aesthetic things, like basically just the little tiny margins, being a lifer is going to give you that edge. I think you can make a better argument for Kareem as the greatest of all time than the greatest Laker of all time. But I think it's one of those three, and you can make a strong argument for any of those three. I don't think any of them are a wrong choice. It's a feeling of incomplete when especially when you project ahead to just, when Jerry West is, not with us anymore, and there's going to be like those tributes and look backs, but you're going to know it's estranged. Right. And there's always
right. And Jerry West is 83 years old. And so, what you're talking about is not, and the Lakers, like you say, when Jerry West eventually passes, the Lakers will do a tribute video, and they'll do it the right way. But you'll know it wasn't a good relationship unless they can repair it before it's done.
Well, I mean, nobody knows all of the exacts on either side of this. And, even in Sam's piece, he noted that there was a lot of specifics that West wouldn't go into in terms of like, okay, this is why X happened, or this is why Y happened. He's just telling you X happened, Y happened, and it pisses me off. For example, West is still upset that, or has expressed being upset that the Lakers did not bring him back with an executive role after Mitch and Jim Buss were let go. When they brought in Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson.
It was sort of widely expected that they would, because he was out there and available and apparently wanted to do it.
Yeah. And, there's stuff in there about, we're going to get into more of the specifics of this, but like stuff about season tickets that apparently Dr. Buss had promised Jerry West lifetime and presumably, on the arm, on the house. And that those were last season taken from the West family, that they were informed they would no longer have those seats. Ryan West, his son, very well regarded in his own right, used to be a part of the Laker front office when Jerry West wasn't there. And he's no longer there.
There's certainly Jerry West's belief that their problems forced Ryan West out the door.
Yeah,
that comes through. Let's get into some of this stuff, because I think it's not only are some of these details interesting, what this story reveals, I think, about the team and the way the team operates is also kind of fascinating and also highly relevant to some of the other issues that we see around the team, including how well they performed this year. We'll do all that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Built Bar. It's the new year, and that means New Year's resolutions. And if yours is about getting fit, eating healthier, you want to make Built Bar part of that plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. It allows you to eat healthy without it getting boring. You start looking for that chocolate. Guess what? Built Bars, they are covered in 100% real chocolate. Most Built Bars contain just 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, but 17 grams of protein. That's the good stuff. A lot of great flavors to choose from: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, mint brownie, and down the line. Always really cool, unique combinations coming out. You're going to want to try them all. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off your first order. Again, promo code LOCKED15, 15% off at built.com.
It should be noted, Andy, that in this story, Sam Amick, obviously at The Athletic, reached out to Jeannie Buss and the Lakers. They did not comment. So this is Jerry West's presentation of what went wrong in this relationship, and the Lakers chose not to comment. And I understand why. You don't necessarily want to get into a public argument with Jerry West, especially when your team is 3 games under 500, because you know what? You're probably not going to win. I get where they're coming from by not engaging. And so when you read this story, it should be read with the idea that, look, Jerry West is a salty fellow, that while I don't think he is a liar, I don't think that's who the guy is. Perception probably colors a lot of what he's talking about in the story and things like that. But like this, that you mentioned, the tickets thing, Dr. Buss, Jerry West has promised them lifetime season tickets, and they were apparently revoked by text. He says they texted his wife and said, "Oh, by the way, your season tickets are no more." Maybe there's more to that story. Maybe there's not. The idea that that they would revoke his season tickets at all is so sort of small. And done. Like Jerry West can afford season tickets, I'm sure, and will never buy them because of the principle. Like stuff like that, like you just wonder about generally. And I will say, like, setting aside Jerry West's own sort of psychology and individual personality quirks, the Lakers remain an incredibly insular organization. And it's ironically, the inability to kind of get along with one of their own drives home how insular they are. You kind of look around the organization, and it's Rob Pelinka, who's connected through Kobe as the general manager. And they tried Magic Johnson, and that didn't work. They are the only franchise on the planet that would let Kurt and Linda Rambis near the levers of power that they have. That doesn't happen anywhere else, particularly with Kurt. Like they, Frank Vogel's an outsider, and they won't commit to him. They wouldn't commit to Ty Lue, outsider. Monty Williams, outsider. Like they wouldn't, it's a
Ty Lue isn't really an outsider. He played with the team. He's part of championship teams.
You're right.
He shouldn't have been considered an outsider. It's funny, Brian, that you say that.
It's a very insular organization still.
Well, they are, but you had mentioned that they, this is them fighting with one of their own. The truth is they've always fought with their own. I mean, they've always been an insulated organization, and it's an organization that has always been marked by infighting. Like, when has there been a period with the Lakers where there have not been tons and tons of stories of infighting? I mean,
Mhm.
they're run by a damn family, and half the family doesn't speak to each other. And I don't say
That's
that to make
true.
I don't say that to make light of it. I'm just saying that is the situation. Like, two of Jeannie Buss's brothers, they were attempting a coup, like an actual coup of ownership. Like, the idea that they would be fighting with one of their own. My response to that is that's what the Lakers do. Like, it's just sort of their history. The tickets thing, I got to be honest, my first reaction to that wasn't even that's really petty by the Lakers. My first reaction was, can Jerry West, as an employee of different organizations, actually get season tickets from another
From another
organization
one.
for
That's a good
free?
question. No, I
Like,
hadn't
I
thought
mean,
about that.
Jeannie and Phil Jackson, they were an engaged couple. And
Right.
when Phil was running the Knicks and Jeannie was, doing what Jeannie does with the organization, they were not allowed to talk about basketball. And they were an engaged couple. So, like, my first reaction was like, how can like, that doesn't seem on the up and up that Jerry West can even get those tickets in the first place.
No,
I
I
mean,
guess
remove whatever.
no,
Remove
you're
whatever
right. I
pettiness.
assume, I mean, they must have been doing it while he was with Memphis, even. So, like, the arrangement goes back a long
Yeah,
way.
but tampering has become a much bigger thing. Like, I mean, look at some of the stuff that, like, Magic's gotten in trouble for.
No, you're
Talking
right.
about Paul
You're right.
George and this stuff. I mean, that was as much as Magic should have known better. That was also Magic just screwing around on Jimmy Kimmel.
I look at the way that they are structurally, and we can quit after this. We'll try to get to some of the coaching responses about Vogel maybe through the rest of the week. And when they're not there, the fans shouldn't be kind of angry at the Bus family, or trying to get Jeannie to sell the team. Like, I see this around, like, this is a good owner. Like, she is a good owner of this team. They try very hard to win. Um, I mean, I'm not saying they're perfect, but they try very hard to win year in and year out.
I think they care a lot about winning. I go back and forth on whether or not actually a good owner. Wanting to win does not make you a good owner.
No, but it's step one, and there are a lot of owners that don't care.
Okay.
Look, I don't say this to be like, if
Well, that
somebody
makes you
else,
a bad owner. That doesn't necessarily make somebody who cares a good owner.
fair point. What I mean by this is they are at the very least, you have an ownership group in LA who have a strong commitment to winning. Are they good at it? Depends on the year. And if you said, we'll swap out the Bus family for a better owner, like, okay, fine. Like, this is not loyalty to Jeannie Buss.
Might actually just be a wealthier owner, to be totally
she doesn't
honest.
talk to us anymore. It's not like we have this like deep relationship that we're trying to preserve with the Bus family. All I'm saying is it could be a lot worse from an ownership standpoint. And I give them credit for wanting to make this team good. But like you said, like, I wonder, this is where the competent part comes in. Like, how good at it are they? How modern are they? And they've gotten better at some aspects of it. They use, they brought in better training, and they've done stuff like that, and they've sort of modernized aspects of that. And a lot of that actually does go to Rob Pelinka. But in other ways, they're still very provincial and very insulated. And there are times when that combined, Andy, with sort of the family money aspect of this, where the franchise is incredibly wealthy, but the family is not necessarily.
By ownership standards, they are
by
wealthy
ownership,
by any normal standards.
correct. Where that butts into each other in ways that do hold the team back. That's sort of what this story reminded me. I am sure there's another side to this that you don't get from just hearing Jerry West, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong about some of the other concerns that I have.
The last thought I had on this was just the idea of, bringing back Jerry West in an executive role. We were talking before about how insulated the organization is, which is in part what led them to bringing in Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka. The idea of two completely unproven guys to run the organization. Maybe one, maybe the other, but both was a pretty bold move that reflects, in part, among other things, how insulated you are. it creates like a catch-22 with bringing in Jerry West, because on one hand, you could use a guy like Jerry West with those two. On the other hand, though, with somebody like Jerry West in particular, you only accentuate and, I guess, perpetuate that cycle of insulation. And on top of it, given who Jerry West was with the organization to begin with, you undercut the idea that Rob Pelinka is the ultimate decision maker in the organization, or even Magic Johnson is the ultimate decision maker in the organization.
Right.
Because if Jerry West is there, everybody is going to assume, no matter what Jerry West's role is, even if he's some type of made-up title consultant, everybody is going to.
Right.
People assumed that Jerry West was the reason that the Lakers got the Pau Gasol deal. Jerry West wasn't even with the Grizzlies then, but they assumed that he managed to make that happen because of who Jerry West is. So just this cycle of insulation can create a lot of different issues for the team, and it can cut in a lot of different directions. And I think, the bitterness that West is clearly still feeling in terms of the way he was treated by the organization, going back to when Phil Jackson kicked him out of the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately the organization had to make a choice between Jerry West and Phil. They chose Phil. There's a lot to this. There's a lot. It's more than just season tickets.
Right. And of course, and the goal isn't to make Jerry West a martyr and the Lakers a villain. That's none of my point in any of this.
Sure.
It's just, it is revealing in ways that I found very interesting. It's worth a read. Sam Amick's story on The Athletic. Locked on Lakers. Again, thanks for making us your first listen of every single day, Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturdays and Sundays, depending on what's going on. We'll have more on the YouTube channel, more coming up this week. Important games Wednesday night versus Portland, Thursday night against the Clippers. Lots to talk about on Locked on Lakers. We'll see everybody on Thursday.